All right. Well, I am super excited to be here today with all of you to share a little bit about what I have learned in terms of teaming and psychological safety. I'd like to begin with a story that takes place in 1977. There was a flight disaster between a KLM flight and a Pan Am flight. And this flight disaster occurred because a Dutch crew did not challenge the captain's decision to take off. And in conjunction with ambiguous communication, this caused the death of 583 passengers at Tenerife. In 1978, United Airlines Flight 173 crashed in Portland, Oregon, after the plane ran out of fuel, while the flight crew were troubleshooting larger landing gear problems. And the National Transportation Safety Board found that the captain's failure to accept input from other crew members, as well as a lack of assertiveness from those crew members, contributed to the crash. So as many of you know, in every hospital and every healthcare system, there comes a time when we experience a crisis. In that crisis, people are shouting, alarms are blaring, and unfamiliar faces may surround us. The stakes can be high, and time matters because death is imminent. Our stress levels go up, our hearts race, and the fog of war can descend upon us as elephants are missed. Simply put, we may be in the middle of chaos, and in these crises, we need to remember that these day-to-day interactions can often be our reality. To make sense of this chaos or even this pandemic, and to improve our performance, I'd like to focus on the non-technical skills that are required for effective teamwork in a crisis situation or in day-to-day activities. So this evening, we're going to use the lens of preparation, the lens of communicating effectively, and the lens of making a decision in the heat of the moment to guide our thinking process. So I want you to consider this first question. What individual factors affect your performance? I'd like to share with you a concept to help achieve this understanding. Crisis management has historically focused on the primary survey as the very first step of management of that crisis. But before we do scene safety checks, we should take a moment and actually check ourselves as part of a pre-resuscitation ritual, or maybe as part of a pre-discussion ritual. And you may be wondering, what does that actually mean? In this context, I believe that checking ourselves is about assessing our physical and our cognitive selves before managing a crisis. This idea is part of a survey called the 0-point survey, which includes a series of steps to optimize non-clinical processes for an actual primary survey. Before the start of a resuscitation, or maybe even a loaded discussion, physical readiness can be assessed via a checklist, I'm safe, which considers illness, medications, stress, alcohol, fatigue, eating, and elimination. Imagine how your performance or your discussion would change if you prepared by grabbing a quick snack or going to the restroom a few minutes before a patient entered an operating room or a trauma bay or an office visit. Another mnemonic that can help us prepare is HALTS. HALTS outlines how being hungry, angry, late, tired, or stressed can affect complex task performance. In a crisis, in a high-stakes situation, preparation is about knowing who you are. And so the acronyms I'm safe and HALTS provide a checklist for physical and mental readiness. In healthcare, we don't work in a linear world that's explained by simple cause and effect. Very simply, even if we understood the individual parts of a situation perfectly, we may not be able to understand the entire situation as a whole. This is because we work in the healthcare environment, which is a complex, adaptive environment. Teams must come together and work together, often at a moment's notice. And the elements of a potential crisis can be unpredictable and unplanned. These elements are in a dynamic flux, they react to each other, and they influence behavior. This complex adaptive system is characterized by multiple simultaneous feedback loops. One element of the environment can impact another one, and that in turn can feed back to an original trigger. This often appears like chaos. In healthcare, we often have to work with unfamiliar team members at a moment's notice. And so to prepare for this situation, we need to be able to answer this second question. Who would you want on your team, maybe in a crisis, especially if team members did not know each other? Now, many of us have heard the expression that there is no I in team. And I think this concept is an important one as we try to figure out what makes the perfect team. We need to remember that our team in a crisis will be part of that unpredictable environment that categorizes the complex adaptive system. So let's imagine for a moment that we could choose anyone to be a part of our perfect team. Who would we pick? Would we pick someone who's intelligent with a high IQ? Would we pick someone who's motivated? Would we pick someone who's extroverted? Would we pick someone who's had experience? Or would we pick people who always work together? So Google wanted to investigate this question. In their quest to build the perfect team, they began to study why certain teams were more successful than others. And what they realized is that the who did not matter. It didn't matter how smart you were. It didn't matter how much experience you had or the source of your motivation. What matters is how team members treat one another. Google found that good teams do two things. Number one, members speak in roughly the same proportion of time. There is an equality in the distribution of conversation turn-taking. Simply put, one person does not dominate the conversation. And number two, good teams have high social sensitivity. In other words, team members were able to tell how other members felt by the tone of their voice, facial expressions, and nonverbal cues. Together, equal conversation plus social sensitivity equals psychological safety. Psychological safety was coined and popularized in 1999 by Amy Edmondson as a team climate characterized by interpersonal trust and mutual respect in which people are comfortable being themselves. So I believe that having high social sensitivity facilitates our ability to know the skills, to know the weaknesses, and to know the strengths of unfamiliar team members. Knowing your team is also about being curious about other team members. And this requires direct and clear language. So let's consider this question. When do you call for help to make your team stronger? We often don't call for help because of fears of criticism among junior faculty or incapability among seniors. With the potential of a high cognitive burden in a high-stakes situation or in a state of chaos, we need to call for help so that we can see the elephant in the room. Researchers at MIT found that successful teams explore outside the team and bring back information. In other words, they ask for help. Now, communication confined to only the team is not the same as exploring outside of the team. A team that's willing to engage with outside members is more likely to ask for help and gain fresh perspectives that may be missing if we're hungry, if we're angry, if we're late, if we're tired, or stressed. During a crisis, we want to encourage exploration to learn. Because bringing in an expert is part of good teamwork. These experts have collected experiences that can help us make a decision to avoid an error that we may be making. Group members who are concentrating on different parts of a task may not have an integrated view of the overall situation. So it's going to be important to know how to share the mental model. A mental model is an understanding of the situation that's in front of us, the tasks that need to be done, and the resources available. So I'm reminded of a short story that was told to me in medical school that illustrates the lack of a shared mental model. A woman driver comes racing round a corner, barely in control. "Pig," she shouts at a man driving the other way. "You're a pig," he shouts back. The man rounds the corner, hits a pig, and dies. If we don't share the same mental model, despite our best intentions, accidents can happen. So I want you to watch this video on teamwork and trust and imagine what would have needed to have been communicated to prevent what you have seen.
Fall, and it'll be an exercise in building trust between one another. So Harrison, if you don't mind going first, step up here on this chair and close your eyes. All right, and then everybody fill in, and we're going to ask you to fall, and then they will catch you. So you have to trust us. So I'm going to count to 3, just relax and fall, okay? 1, 2, 3. No!
Some people see a young woman with her head turned towards the background, while others see an elderly woman's side profile. Interestingly, a 2018 Australian study found that who you are affects what you see. Younger participants saw the young woman, while older participants saw the elderly woman. What do you see in this picture? It depends. You may see a duck or you may see a rabbit. The duck's beaks are also rabbit's ears. So sharing the mental model is about ensuring that all team members are on the same page. By sharing the mental model, we shift from egocentric management to team-centered management so that every single team member comprehends what's going on. To propose a mental model, ask a team member, "What's going on?" Or, "Do you have any thoughts?" Or simply ask, "What else?" An event leader or event coordinator is inviting a sharing of information so that everyone can learn. So although we may hope that we know everyone in a crisis situation or a high-stakes situation, the reality is that we often have to work and communicate with strangers. And so we need to figure out, how do you organize a team of strangers on the fly or in a pandemic? Renowned researcher Amy Edmondson suggests that the answer lies with the verb teaming. Simply put, leading is about teaming. Teaming is teamwork on the fly. It involves coordination and collaboration without the benefit of stable team structures, because many operations, like hospitals, require a level of staffing flexibility that makes stable team composition rare. To team is to organize to learn. And leaders do this by asking questions, sharing information, seeking help, experimenting with unproven actions, talking about mistakes, and seeking feedback. In a crisis situation, there are often multiple leaders. In fact, I'd like to challenge a conventional wisdom that focuses on leaders and followers and shift our frame to leaders and leaders. I believe that this change empowers every member of a team to speak up and prevents the classic situation where we have followers who are waiting for formal leaders to assign roles or make a decision. So in a crisis, consider identifying a team coordinator who allocates leadership roles in a team that respects the chain of command. Leadership allocation is about determining who will lead each task in a crisis. But it's easy to forget to do this when our cognitive burden is high. Allocation of leadership is part of organizing to team, and it can allow us to see that elephant in the room. So remember, we need to resuscitate our voice and the voices of all team members. The first action a leader must take is to announce him or herself and his or her role. And at the same time, leaders must create an environment that fosters inquiry rather than waiting for others to come forward. Sometimes these roles are clear, other times it's not. For example, both an anesthesiologist and a surgeon can place a central line. In the example of a central line placement that both a surgeon and an anesthesiologist can perform, an effective leader will see that confusion and preempt. Dr. A, please intubate. Dr. B, place the line. The role allocation can include a cognitive roadmap. Dr. B, wait for Dr. C to intubate before placing the central line, and let me know when you're done. This type of language is direct. So have you ever been in a situation where the event coordinator or team leader has an incorrect mental model or maybe moving in the wrong direction? Remember, a leader may not be perfect, and in these circumstances, we need to be able to challenge authority. Remember that 1977 flight. A Dutch crew did not challenge the captain's decision to take off. So how do we challenge authority during a high-stakes scenario? The two-challenge rule, which was developed in aviation, can be modified for the medical environment by using what's called an advocacy inquiry technique. The advocacy component is stating your view, and inquiry is asking a question to seek the information. It's really about being curious. I noticed that you aren't wearing a mask. Can you let me know what you're thinking? The respondent may say it's part of a new protocol. And then the second challenge. Okay, but I'm worried about your safety. What do you think? And the respondent may say, I think it will be okay. High advocacy, high inquiry conversations foster information transfer, two-way communication, and learning. I state my views, and I inquire into yours. And I'm inquiring with general curiosity, not preconceived notions. In the airline industry, if a team member fails to adequately respond to two or more challenges regarding omissions or questionable actions, the individual is assumed to have lost situational awareness. Successful teaming and consequently leading requires that leaders create an environment of psychological safety. If psychological safety exists, members can speak up without fear of being embarrassed, rejected, or punished. Remember, psychological safety is a team climate characterized by interpersonal trust and mutual respect in which people are comfortable being themselves. And Amy Edmondson will clarify common misconceptions about psychological safety. Psychological safety is not about being nice. Psychological safety is not a personality factor. Psychological safety is not another word for trust. And psychological safety is not about lowering performance standards. So psychological safety is not the same as trust. Trust is about giving others the benefit of the doubt when you take a risk. Psychological safety is the belief that others will give you the benefit of the doubt when you take a risk. Trust occurs between two individuals. Psychological safety is experienced by groups or even your code team. Psychological safety is about honestly admitting your mistakes, giving and taking feedback, and forgetting any privilege or status. We can create psychological safety if we are accessible, invite participation, acknowledge the limits of knowledge, hold people accountable for transgressions, set boundaries, highlight failures as learning opportunities, use direct language, and be willing, this is the most important thing, to display fallibility. Now you may be wondering, how does this translate into the heat of the moment? So I want you to take a look at these examples of dialogue that facilitate psychological safety. Imagine a conversation in a crisis where team members state, "This situation is over my head," or "Don't speak to her like that. That's not okay. If I miss this intubation, I'll need you to take over. Jessica, please start chest compressions now. I missed the diagnosis. Let's reset. Are we missing anything? What can I do for you? What can we learn from that near miss? Thank you very much.